Hey everyone, welcome to the CSI Secret Store community call. Today is the April 29th. This call falls under the CNCF Code of Conduct and it's being recorded as well. For all the attendees, please go ahead and add your name to the attendees list on the doc. And I think we have quite a few new folks joining the call today. So do you all want to introduce yourself to the community?
I'm Joe Barrow from AWS.
Hey, Joe.
Hey guys, this is Nilik from Microsoft.
Hey, Nilik.
Hey.
Hi everyone, this is it's Chris from AWS.
Hey, Chris.
Hey.
Okay, so jumping into the agenda, we actually only have one item today, so it's pretty short. So the first item on the list is from Joe and Chris, basically the code audit for CSI acceptance for the AWS provider. Yeah, Joe, you want to talk about it?
Sure, what you're looking for from me. Before we jump into that, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up, and we could probably talk about it at the end. But there were some comments on the agenda from the last meeting, and I was wondering if I could bring that up after we're done with this too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What would you like to hear about the code or about what we're doing?
No, I think so. Chris had reached out to me. AWS has open sourced the provider, and so there are a couple of criteria that we have added in the documentation for adding a new provider. So I think the first one is basically the maintainers and reviewers from the CSI Secret Store community being able to do a small audit on the provider code to make sure that it satisfies all the requirements. And then the next step would be to enable end-to-end testing on the driver for the new provider. So it could start off with some basic tests to make sure that it's compliant with the driver spec and the provider spec. And once we have the test validation and see that it's green, then we can go ahead and add the new provider to the list of supported providers in the documentation. So I think this is for the first step. And what do folks in the community think about helping the AWS provider with the audit for the code?
Yeah, I can take a look through it. And then I think for the integration test, though, there's maybe this is what Joe's going to bring up, the like whether or not it should be the BATS or the Ginkgo kind of tests. I presume, yeah, or, it might be easier to do the BATS style since there's more examples.
Chris has already written some tests and run them.
Yes. So I was going to be working on the BATS version. Tommy, there were two types of tests that you talked about, or
one of the things that's been discussed in previous calls is switching the integration tests from using BATS or like Bash to writing them in Go with the format. But there's like a long-running PR. I think Anish might have the most reviews on that, but it was whether or not like what's probably the easiest way to get it in quickly, I think, is probably continuing with the BATS.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with Tommy because we are eventually switching to Ginkgo. So I have started an initial proposal doc for the Ginkgo test framework, and then I've shared it with Chen for now because we both have been looking at it. But eventually, we'll also want to share that to the wider community, and also when we open the PR for reference. But a good starting point would be to start off with the batch test suite. At least with some of the few basic tests that work with the provider so that we know the driver provider communication works well, and then in terms of error handling and all those, right? And then we'll also help out with the audit for the review. So Tommy will look at it, I'll also go look at it, and then if we find anything, we'll open GitHub issues in the provider. So that'll be useful. But in terms of the test suite, I think starting off with bats is probably a good first step. And then when we have the Ginkgo framework, the plan is to have the initial test framework that could be consumed by all the providers. That is what we want to get in first. And once we have that, then eventually we'll start moving individual providers to use the new test framework. And the way we want the framework to be is all the tests be defined by the driver, and then all the tests being defined by the driver, and all the utils also provided by the driver. So from the provider perspective, the implementation should be minimal. So it's around having a secret store already set up and maybe a single object that is there in the external secret store. And the driver would just call the provider to get the provider's custom secret provider class. And typically, this is all we want from the provider and not a complete test suite from the provider. So that should be handled on the driver side. So that is what we are working towards.
Are you looking for the test suite in the audit as well? Because we haven't committed our E2E tests in our Git repository yet.
So for the provider audit, we are not looking for the test suite, but eventually when the provider needs to be onboarded to the driver, it would be good to have the E2E test in the driver for the provider.
Yeah.
Does this also answer your questions about the discussion from the last call?
No, there was a comment in the agenda notes from the last call that said currently no provider is optimized to not fetch secrets if they haven't changed. And we have actually implemented that optimization when the rotation reconciler runs. So we have two different sort of secret stores in AWS. There's a parameter store and secrets manager, and we support both of them. In the secrets manager case, we have a describe call we can run, which is way lighter weight. It doesn't do a decrypt. It just returns some metadata, which saves customers on the back end. It reduces API calls to other services and can reduce charges in like the high volume cases. What we do there is we look at the list of existing versions that gets passed in the reconciler case, and we do describe calls on some of the secrets. And if they haven't changed, we don't rewrite the secrets. We don't fetch them again and write them out. I'm not sure how that impacts what you guys were discussing last time.
So doesn't the describe call also translate? I mean, doesn't it add to the API call count?
So in this case, we have a higher API call threshold. So I was talking about the parameter store case. They're sort of what you may call constrained in terms of number of API calls. So what we do there is we use batch calls. We fetch every time. In the secrets manager case, the assumption is that these secrets are not going to rotate frequently. Maybe once a day or 30 days. There are some customers who want to do it more often, but it doesn't add a lot. So doing a single describe call most of the time is going to be the same as doing a fetch call. But again, because the describe call is lighter weight, it actually reduces the number of API calls downstream to other services that they may also be billed for.
Got it. So does the describe call do it for the list of secrets, or is it for each individual secret that the user defines?
Yeah, it's one secret at a time.
One secret at a time. Okay. Yeah, for the other providers, at least, so today we get the version as part of the reconcile call. And then for us, we don't maintain any internal cache in the provider. So eventually what we do is we do a get from the external secret store, and then we have the version in the get. So we have the version as well as the content. So it translates to one get call. And then I think the optimization could be around the fact that if the versions match, so what the current version running and the version that we got matches, we could skip writing to the file system. So that is the optimization that we had thought about initially. But in terms of skipping the API call, I think we couldn't find an option for that one.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're comparing the version, but we're fetching down the current version in the describe call.
Got it.
So yeah, the change like that this affects is that we were moving from the providers writing the files to the file system to the drivers writing to just the driver writing, because we've had problems like turns out writing a file to a file system can be difficult, and so we wanted to consolidate that logic. So we added, as part of the response on the mount calls, basically a view of the file system in the gRPC protos, where it's just the list of file, their like relative path and the contents. And then we're trying to use the same library that Kubernetes uses for writing secrets and config maps to the temporary file system. And that needs the full contents. Yeah, the way that interface is written requires the full thing, so it can do the diffs on the files and do the symlinks.
Yeah, I think one area that we are trying to address with the Tommy's proposal is today also the providers really don't update anything in the file system apart from just updating the content, right? So if the secret provider class started off with 4 secrets, we write 4 of them to the file system. And then during rotation, let's say the user updated the secret provider class to only have 2 secrets. So they wanted the other 2 secrets to go away. But at that point, the providers today actually don't go delete the existing 2 secrets, but they only update the 2 out of the 4. So which means the pod still has access to all the 4 secrets. So one thing we're trying to address is how the driver can handle these cases. So every time that the driver writes to the file system, it'll be more like it'll write to a different directory and then symlink to that. So basically at every point in time, the snapshot matches what is defined in the secret provider class by the user.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading the notes from last time too. I think it's not really reflected in the notes from last time, but an issue, you kind of like described this as whether or not the interface between the provider and the driver should support like patch versus put. And I think one of the mitigations for like load and cost on the secret managers that we had discussed that isn't here was tuning the like polling frequency and making that more right now it's just configured at the daemon set of like poll every 2 minutes, I think is the default.
Right.
And we had discussed some there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I think probably another call before. So we are exploring the option of using the requires republish in the CSI spec for the rotation. So Mika already opened a PR, so it's work in progress. So hopefully we'll be working with him on it. But once we add support for requires republish, which is going GA in 122, we are exploring an option to piggyback on that for the rotation as well. And then if we do that, there might be an option where we could make the rotation configurable, pole interval configurable. For certain workloads, maybe they don't rotate that often. So we could actually have a logic to not call the provider every requires republish. And then for workload that the user expects to be changing constantly, for those we will call frequently as we do today.
I have one more question for Joe on this. How often would like just a subset of the files change or be updated?
Well, it's going to vary by customer, but we would expect it would typically be one out of however many they have, every day or 30 days or something like that. So it should be fairly static most of the time, but there are going to be customers who want to do like high frequency rotations and things like that.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest way that I'm thinking through now of like still using the Kubernetes file writer is a response from the provider saying just no change, right, to anything. But that if there is a change, it would still need to fetch all of the secrets in the mount.
Well, we're kind of driven by the current list that's sent in. So if there's a change to the CRD and you just pass us an empty list, we would remount everything. Or refetch everything, I should say.
Yeah, because at that point, they don't have any version to compare to, right? So it's almost like a new call.
Exactly.
Well, but I think it's the provider is the one that knows. So like what I'm saying is if, we're polling the providers every 2 minutes and secrets aren't changing, but like once a day, the provider can like see that, do the get calls, notice that there's no difference, and then just say there's no difference. But if there's any difference in the mount of like one, then we would need the providers to refetch like the entire mount, not just the one file that changed. Am I describing that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And that's a possibility too. It sort of changes the contract a little bit on that list that's passed in. I guess we would have to wait and see what the final proposal is, and then we could implement it. But we'll have to do something, I guess, one way or another.
Yeah, I think the reason for not doing the patch is we don't know how to delete the files. Like if we keep consistent with today, like what we do today with each provider, like not cleaning up the files, then it could be as simple as the provider just fetching the delta and then sending it back, and then the driver just replacing that delta.
So yeah, I mean, we could. So right now we're taking the list passed in and updating that and returning the whole list. We could just return a partial list as long as the driver is maintaining all the state of what's there before and everything.
So those lists are just about the secrets. They don't include them to which files. So that's where the driver doesn't know how that list maps to the files in the mount.
Yeah, in our case, and I think some of the other cases too, the ID in the list is actually the file name. But if you wanted to expand it to also have a field for the file name, that would be easy enough to fill in as well.
Yeah, I think we need to discuss this a little bit with, probably we can start a Slack thread and like all of us can comment on that as we make progress on the PR. Yeah,
sorry, you're hoping for short meeting here, and I kind of derailed it on you.
No, this is good. No, not at all. It was just a short agenda. We weren't hoping for a short meeting at all. Thank you for talking about this.
Yeah, so I think the key is that it seems like there are customers that would want that kind of or more optimizations on when a secret is accessed based on the metadata about the secrets that currently exist, right?
Yeah, I think from the provider perspective, that'll be a good to have, but it's not possible that all providers could implement it. I mean, if they don't have any caching, then they would probably still have to make the external API call. But I think from the driver perspective, it'll be good to give the provider the option for that. So basically, say if you don't want to go refetch everything, then we support that. At least just give me what the delta is, and I'll write that. But I think if we talk about the delta, then it becomes a little difficult for us on the rotation path.
Yeah. But like I said, if it's just a matter of forcing a refresh occasionally, if we're passed in an empty list, we'll refresh everything.
I guess my point is that we don't know when to send the provider an empty list.
Okay. So you're not detecting the changes, you're just taking whatever's current.
Yeah. Yeah, we just get the, at whatever interval we send the RPC to the providers. And then yeah, because we don't know that anything has changed to say, hey, fetch us everything. I'm going to, this was the original proposal back on the file IO consideration. I'll add a section to it about this, and I think tuning the refresh rate and making sure that there's an easy way for the providers to say they're like, don't change anything, basically omitting the file returned. It's just, yeah, if anything does change, then the writing interface needs all files. It can't take just like just one of 7 has changed without like significant rework. So I'll try to write up something about this. That doc.
Okay. Yeah, I think in terms of action, I think once Tommy has that, we can probably also start off the discussion on the Google Doc, so that we can talk about the different use cases and see if we can converge on a design. Because I think we did open a GitHub issue when we implemented the rotation reconciler on the driver level. We did open an issue for having an option to configure the poll interval per individual secret provider class. So we were trying to gauge interest from the community to see if folks wanted that particular scenario, right? But we didn't get a lot of plus ones from it, but the issue is still open. But I think the idea is the rotation reconciler helps to fetch the new content and then republish it. But also on the other hand, it handles in-place updates of secret provider class. So like a common scenario that we've seen is users start off with a fairly big secret provider class with all the secrets that they want. And then after their apps get access to it, they go and update it to be a shorter list. So then they go and do an in-place update of the secret provider class. So instead of having 10 secrets, they were updated only to 5 secrets. And today, the rotation reconciler is the one that actually handles those scenarios as well. So it gets the latest secret provider class at every rotation interval and then sees what contents have to be in the mount. But I think we probably have to think about that when we discuss this approach, how it can handle the updates to that secret provider class. Joe or Chris, did you have anything else to add?
Not me. How about you, Chris?
No.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, me and Tommy will take a look at the code, and other folks in the community are also welcome to help take a look at the AWS provider and provide any feedback as they get added to the driver. Okay, I think that's it for the agenda. Does anyone have any other topic that they would like to discuss on the call? No. Okay, I think we all get 30 minutes back then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for looking at the code too.
Okay, thank you and welcome.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.